at the end of our last video, 6.1 was really about just looking at bad examples of samples, or what can create some bias in these samples. Now what we're going to start looking at is some good examples of bias. And so your first sampling method that we're going to look at is called the simple random sample, otherwise known as the SRS. So what a simple random sample is, if I kind of skip the fancy language here, is basically randomly choosing a sample of people. So let's say, let's use our high school. Let's say we wanted to survey people about their preferences for lunch. And instead of just picking the people in first hour, because we know that that's a convenience sample, or instead of picking just sending an email out to the whole school, because we know that that's a voluntary response, what you might do is you might select a group of people, maybe 100 people. It doesn't matter their grade. It doesn't matter what classes they take. It doesn't matter their gender, anything like that. But you just randomly select a group of 100 people. Okay. There's many different ways that you could do it. The old fashioned would be like drawing names out of a hat, although that's not realistic. So maybe you use a name or a number generator, which I'm going to show you how to do on your calculator here in a second. But in short, a simple random sample gives each individual and sample an equal chance of being chosen. So it doesn't matter if you are an 8th grader or a senior in our example that we were kind of using. You have an equal chance of being selected because, again, if your name is in a hat, the pieces of paper are all the same size. Or if you are assigning people numbers, every number is equally likely of being chosen. Okay, and so this randomness is one way to eliminate some bias. Now, again, there's still going to be, in this case, even you might still run into some voluntary response bias, but this is at least one way to minimize and not make it a convenience sample. Okay. So there's a couple ways to do it. Now, the way that we're going to go through, and this is what you'll see on your homework as well, is assigning a number to every individual in the population. And so again, that means taking every student at Mount Westonka High School and giving them a number. Now, typically when you do that, you actually start, this is just kind of a scientific process that's been developed over the years, you actually start with the number 0. Okay, so the first person, if you put everything in alphabetical order, the first person would be assigned the digit 0. Okay, then step 2, kind of the old-fashioned way, is that there's actually a table of random digits. You could Google that if you wanted to. You don't need to. I'm going to show you how to use your calculator. But before we had that technology, there was a table of random digits, and so then people would just look at those digits and come up with the people that they were going to sample that way. But like I've said, your calculator actually has a way to do this. So, again, let's say you are going to sample a bunch of people from the high school. And so if you on your calculator hit math, go to the probability tab, and then if you look, there's a couple different options. If you see where it says rand int as your 5th option, you could select that one. The downside of that one is it is going to repeat integers. That's what int means, is integers. And so I actually like number 8 better, rand int no rep. What that means is you're a random integer, but there's not going to be any repeat. Okay, so if I click that, and then here's where you can just type in. So let's say, for us, again, we usually start at 0, and at Mount Westonka High School, there's about 200 per grade. So let's just say 1,100 students, give or take. Right? Go ahead and hit enter. And so what's going to happen is every time I hit enter, it's going to assign me a certain random integer. So in this case, if I had my list here, I would look for student number 58, and that student would be a part of my sample. Hit enter again. I'd look for student 878. They would be a part of my sample. Do it again, do it again. And so you keep doing that over and over until you get the sample size that you want. Okay? That would be an example of a simple random sample where you are truly just trying to get a random sample where it doesn't look at race, gender, or anything like that as a part of the demographic. Okay, So these are right here. If you ever need that, that could be helpful going somewhere down the road. Um, but that's how you do that on your calculator. So let's look at an example where a simple random sample was attempted to be used. You've probably been made aware in your history classes that back during the Vietnam War, we didn't have enough volunteers, and so there had to be a draft lottery initiated. And again, they were trying to make this as fair as possible. And so what they did was they randomly selected people by having 366 capsules. I know there's 365 days in a year, but remember every fourth year we do have a February 29th. So that would be the 366th day. And again, each of those capsules represented each day of the year. Every capsule was the same size. Every day just received one capsule. Okay, so far sounds good. Seems like it's fair. It says they would put the capsules in for 1 month and then mix them up in a wooden box starting in January and December. So January was mixed up 11 times, February was mixed up 10 times, and so on and so on. December was only mixed up once. And so the question is this a good example of an SRS? Why or why not? Now, at first, again, everything was randomized. So it seems good to go so far. But the detail right here that January was mixed up 11 times, but December was only mixed up once, indicates that December was not as mixed in as well as, let's say, January. It is to say that November was not as well mixed in as was February. Okay, and so the months that were in the later of the year had a higher chance of being selected. And so here's the results. These are box plots for every month. On the x-axis, you have the draft number, so like the date that was drafted first, the date that was drafted second, etc. And then on the y-axis, you have each month. Notice how close to the top, again, thinking of draft numbers, December, November, and October are. Okay? Each of those dates were selected at a sooner than if I go all the way to January, for example. Okay? Now notice that January is kind of right in the middle, but it's further back than these three. Okay? Um, and so it ends up being that this was not a fair sample, which is a pretty massive mistake. Again, in history class, you've probably reviewed the Vietnam War, and we know how deadly it was. And so, although we had all the best intentions of making this fair, it ended up not being very fair. Again, because of this little detail that December was only mixed in once. And so December wasn't mixed in very well at all compared to January and February. Okay? In fact, way after it was all said and done, some statisticians, figured out the probability of all this happening, and they found that there was less than a 0.1% chance that you could find similar results if this was truly a random sample. Right? Again, a pretty big mistake considering what these draftees were being asked to do. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to create this. I want to recreate this scenario, except let's try and make um, a more fair draft. Okay. Now I know I just showed you how to create or select random numbers on your calculator, but on your homework, we're all going to be trying to answer the same questions. And if we truly use a random number generator, then what's going to happen is that all of you are going to get different answers, and it's going to be impossible for me to actually mark anything correct since we're all, again, getting different answers. And so we are going to do this in the old fashioned way. And what I mean by that is we're going to be using a random number, a table of random numbers. There we go. And so this is an actual thing. Okay, I'll show you a picture here that I just found on Google. But again, back before we had all of this technology, one way that you could make a fair sample of by randomly selecting numbers is that there is a legitimate table of random numbers. Okay? In fact, the book that this class is based off of has this table in their index. And so what you do is, if you assigned everybody a one-digit number, Then you would just go, you can read this table from left to right, up and down. You could do it diagonally if you wanted to, but the first person selected according to this table would be person number 3. Okay? But you can start anywhere you wanted. So let's say you wanted to start right here at person number 9, and then the next person is person number 1, and then 2, and then 5, and so on. Okay? So that's what we're going to use, but we have to follow some rules here. All right? So when you are using a random table of values, I keep mixing that up. A table of random values. To conduct an SRS. There's basically 2 rules you need to follow. Again, you need to start at 0. I mentioned that earlier. Okay? But then also, and here's the biggie, if I'm using this example that we just talked about with the draft, then I'm going to be specific here. Every day has to have the same digits. Okay? So here's what that means. If there are 366 days, that means that December 31st, the last day of the year, is going to be represented by a 3-digit number. Okay? So then that means that the first day of the year, January 1st, also needs to be represented by a 3-digit number. So here's how you do that. You don't need to start at the number 100. Okay? What you do is you assign, because we just said you need to start at 0, so you assign January 1st the number 000. And then you assign January 2nd the number 001. You assign January 3rd 002, and so on until you get to the end of the year. December 31st is the second to last day of the year. Because we started at 000, even though that is technically the 365th day, that would be assigned number 364. And then December 31st, even though that's the 366th day, remember we are including February 29th, even though that's the 365th day, or 66th day, because we started at 0, that would be assigned the number 365. Okay? And so that is how we use a table of values. Again, there's basically 2 rules. You have to start at 0. Okay? Again, when this process was being developed, that was just something that somebody decided, and so we've just always used that rule. And then every item in the list, in this case we were talking about days of the year, has to have the same digits, the same number of digits, to clarify that. So again, in this case, the last day of the year was going to be a 3-digit number, so the first day of the year was a 3-digit number. Okay? And again, so now that I have some days listed here, to show you how I would use this table, you would enter in a random spot. So you don't always start in the top left. Okay? Like I said, you just kind of enter in a random spot. And so let's say I start here. All right? That 3-digit number is 083. So whatever day I assigned 083, that would be the first day that I pick. Okay? Or that I got that was drafted. My next 3-digit number is 424. Okay, well that's not a day in a year. 786. Oh, that doesn't work either. Okay, here's 1302. So whatever day was assigned number 302, that would be the second list of draftees. And so you would just keep going through this table until you had selected whatever sample you want. Okay, and again, that's definitely not the most efficient way to do it, but with the tools that we are using, again, that's just how we have to do it for homework, so that I can see that we're all getting the right answers. Okay, and so that's how we're going to be doing that on Schoology. All right. So again, this was 6.2. So go ahead and work on that homework. and have a good day.